Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews, with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about Frozenbyte Studios' puzzle platforming adventure, Trine 3: The Artifacts of Power. Find out if this title tackles things from a brand new angle, or if my experience with Trine 3 was trying. It's been a little while since the wizard Amadeus, the warrior Pontius, and the rogue Zoya have been called upon to save the world. Something which has enabled them to begin pursuing their dreams and doing what they love. Or it would, were it not for the ominous darkness infesting the land, which sees them getting press-ganged into action by the sentient artifact known as the Trine once again. As far as narrative beats go, it's not really all that different from the earlier titles, given that Trine seems to have a penchant for gathering up heroes and blindly tossing them at problems, like some sort of medieval duct tape. And if you're a fan of more comedic titles, there's certainly a lot of fun dialogue to go along with your adventure. That said, if you're looking for a story that manages to come to a satisfying conclusion, you're going to end up dreadfully disappointed. And that's because while Trine 3 does introduce some interesting story notes, it ends fairly abruptly and on a cliffhanger that feels more like the end of the first act of a story arc than any sort of real resolution to a game. What was more jarring for me, however, was just how differently it played, if only because I'd played its earlier iterations. Genre-wise, you can expect the same as the earlier games, given that it remains a puzzle platformer with some physics-based puzzle solving, but it eschews the 2.5D presentation of its precursors and moves fully into 3D. Whilst I imagine this might help some people have trouble discerning 2D graphics, I know you folks are out there, Lovey's one of you. It doesn't actually add as much depth as you'd think to the game, and I found myself occasionally stumbling off to an instant death I couldn't see more than a few times, or abruptly throwing myself out of bounds into the cold embrace of the void. It's janky, more or less, and whilst there's always been a charming degree of that in earlier titles due to the stupid shenanigans you can manage with this physics engine of the game, it's not the same here. The gaming experience feels rougher on certain fronts, and what the game wanted from adding another dimension doesn't ultimately feel worth it. And that's without even talking about what it lost. For those who are familiar with earlier iterations of Trine, the various stages are rife with collectibles, which takes the form of experience droplets needed to unlock abilities for your various characters, and achievements for the obsessive. Trine 3, on the other hand, discards this system, replacing those collectibles with Trine angles, which are essentially collectibles you'll be hunting down to unlock secondary stages for a bit of fun and to advance the main game, since you need a certain amount of those collectibles to progress. Whilst I'm not averse to the collect-a-thon aspect of the game or solving the various puzzles you encounter across the stages, I missed the gradually unlocking slew of abilities to toy around with, especially since combining those abilities when you're playing co-op was a lot of fun. And I especially miss it because the game pares down on player capabilities. A lot of the puzzles you encounter end up feeling a lot simpler in turn, as you lack the tools at your disposal that you had in earlier games. In essence, you're bereft of the ability to craft the same level of dynamic and often ridiculous solutions that you used to be able to muster, so the game leans a little harder on platforming segments as well as simply hiding objects. That said, the co-op experience was still fairly enjoyable, in part because it's a lot easier to revive downed characters now, so you can simply camp their corpse for a few moments to spawn them, making it fairly easy to bring back players into the thick of things. What's more, online co-op doesn't limit people to the same screen anymore, allowing you to split up and poke around an area for puzzles to solve or collectibles to nab. The same can't be said for couch co-op, admittedly, as the screen follows one player, which led to more than a few awkward deaths. But advancing far enough did generally work as a decent way to snap stray party members back into the thick of things and back onto the screen. Which, I mean, whilst the gameplay, I guess I've been talking a fair bit about Trine 3's visuals and its camera, so let's dive into my thoughts on them. And honestly, despite the unpleasantness that can occur with camera angles in couch co-op, or by virtue of the occasional bit of player stupidity and the inability to actually control the camera in general, things do look quite good. Overall, it's a very visually appealing title, and it manages to bring in the lush environments you may have come to expect from earlier titles. Plus, there's a lovely array of enemy types to encounter, at least in regards to their appearances, if not their habits. What's more, that aesthetic strength doesn't end there, as the voice work that went into the game does a solid job of bringing life and humor to both the protagonists and the situations at large. And it certainly doesn't hurt that the soundtrack is altogether pleasant to listen to. But was it enough that I'd recommend this title strongly? At the end of my playthrough of the game, I had mixed thoughts, and writing down all of this only reinforced it further to one side. Whilst Trine 3 is certainly an adequate platformer, a lot of the strength for the experience came from playing co-op with a friend. Without that, it's a far less enjoyable experience, as a lot of the charm of its earlier iterations is gone now. I still consider it alright as a platform experience, but when measured against its predecessors, it distinctly feels like it stumbled and straddled the line between being a fumble and the potential for being something more. Ultimately, I'd say if you're a fan of the Trine series and want to enjoy the characters, find out a bit more about where they're going, or play the game with a friend, it may hold some potential, but it's a much simpler playing experience compared to its predecessors that just loses its luster. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment, and for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or Monday TTRPG content, hit the subscribe button, and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord. You can click the link in the banner or the description to become a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. Lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel, we do have a coffee running now to help supplement funds for our lovely editor, and to make sure we can continue to provide quality content. Again, check the description of the banner for them links. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.